Well, good morning and welcome to another Wednesday reflection. It's so good to be with you this morning on Easter week. Well, during our Easter week, what a great week that we get to stop in the busiest of our year, or at least intentionally focus on what Christ has done for us on the cross and on the resurrection. And, church, you might remember as we've been walking through this entire year, this is the thing that God has been leading everything up to since Genesis 3 in the fall in the Garden of Eden. This has been God's plan. And this weekend, we remember that. So I have a question I want to start with this afternoon, or sorry, this morning, and that's this question. When it comes to Christmas, when it comes to Easter, when it comes to 4th of July, when it comes to the big holidays in the year, how do you prepare for? How do you make the most of? How do you anticipate those special events? Well, as you chew on that, I want to stop and just say it is a joy as the pastor here and on our team to get to see how God is bringing people to Cornerstone, how he's using your gifts and your skill sets to not only bless our church, but then through you to bless our community. It's one of the great things. I feel like there's several ways in which I kind of pinch myself. Like I get to do this for my job. One is hearing your stories. I get to sit down with people as we head towards baptism and hear what God's done in their life, and then getting to walk with them and their families and see what God's doing. That's an incredibly sweet thing. And yeah, of course, it means that I also get to walk through the hard things with you guys as well. But it's a sweet thing to be privileged enough to get to hear your stories and see some of my own in them. And I also see God in yours in ways, in your stories in ways I haven't before. But because of my perspective and because of the seat that God's put me in, I get to see all sorts of things across the church family. And I love getting to see how he's bringing people to our church, how he's using the people that are already here and the skill sets and the passions and the excitement you have. For example, one thing this last weekend when we were doing the Saturday work project, somebody within our congregation came up and said, "Hey, if I coordinate people bringing flowers, could we plant flowers in this garden bed?" Well, you know what? That was such an incredible blessing because the men who take care of our grounds week in and week out, they don't have time to do that. But to have someone from the congregation say, "I love to plant bright flowers. I would love to do that," was not only a blessing to our grounds crew, but if you've walked into our church in the last week, was probably a blessing to you as the bright flowers brightened your day. And so it's just exciting to see. And so I want to encourage you to continue to think about what are the skills, the interests, the passions, the heartbeats that God's given you, the experiences that he might want to use to not only serve our church, but to reach our community for the lost. So chew on that. Continue to think on it with me, and let's continue to pray. Now, there's one thing this week that we can all do. All of us this week can invite somebody to church this Easter Sunday. Now, some of you are going to be incredible at this, and whether it's through just courage or you've built a habit of inviting people to church, you can do this well, and you might be inviting somebody each day or multiple people each day. For some of you, this is a stretch. You're like, I've never invited someone to church. That's kind of scary. I want to encourage you to stretch yourself this week. Start with just one person. Say, "Lord, is there one person this week that you would have me invite to church? Lord, give me the courage to invite them, to put myself out there, to invite them to come and hear the good news of the gospel. Lord, give me the eyes to see that opportunity." And Lord, and church, I believe that if we come before the Lord and say, "Lord, give me the opportunity and give me the courage," I think he'll give us the opportunity and he'll give us the courage. We have a God who is near. He hears our prayers. He desires for people to come to know him. You know, Jesus said the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And a small place in which we can join in that harvest as laborers is to invite people to church. So, church, I want to encourage all of us and challenge all of us. And this is a challenge for me as well, to invite one person to church who we know doesn't already come here. Maybe that's one neighbor. Maybe that's one colleague. Maybe that's someone at the checkout line at the supermarket that you start a conversation with. Whatever it looks like, God, I pray that God would open an opportunity for you and put somebody on your heart. That's one way we can all use the relationships we have and the opportunities we have this week. Well, back to my question. Making the most of opportunities. You know, there's an important thing that we are intentional about the events of the year. We're intentional about Thanksgiving, right? My wife pulls out the Thanksgiving fall decorations and we decorate the house for Thanksgiving, and we get excited about Thanksgiving lunch and we prepare for that. We get excited about Christmas. We start playing Christmas music on the radio and we start decorating the house for it. You know, 4th of July, maybe red, white, and blue come out and you begin thinking about, what am I going to do on the 4th of July for that holiday? Well, what do you do for Easter? What's our intentionality for Easter? Do some decorations come out? Is there a way in which you are preparing your own heart and mind for this season that you might enjoy it, but also remember why we have it? In the Old Testament, As God establishes his people, he gives them not only his law, but then he gives them 7 feasts throughout the year. And actually including this is the weekly Sabbath. If you turn to Leviticus 23, it starts with the Sabbath. Once a week, God calls his people to stop, to pause, to reflect on who he is and what he's done for his people, and for them to respond in worship. And then throughout the course of the year, he gave them 6 more feasts, or maybe even 7 more feasts, that they would stop every so often in the year to pause, to reflect on what God had done for them, on who God was, and to worship him. Easter is one of those for us this year. That God has invited us to stop, to pause, to reflect on what he's done for us through Jesus Christ, his Son, our Savior, and to worship him for it. And church, I've got to be honest, in my own life, as life has gotten busy, as I've gone through school, as I've worked and been a teacher, this is not one of those seasons that I've always done a great job of slowing down and enjoying. Christmas, it's pretty natural. We have Christmas breaks. Easter, we don't always have Easter breaks. And so part of my hope for the Good Friday service on Friday is that maybe it helps us kind of slow down as we head into the weekend. It begins to put our mind and our hearts in a place as we head into Easter weekend to say, man, God, not only did you die for me, not only did you have to, that's how great my sin was, but God, how great your love was that you died for me. Well, as we think about how to be intentional as a family, you realize Lauren and I are still a young family. We have an 11-year-old, a 9, almost 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and almost 5-year-old. And so we're still trying to figure out these traditions. And I'm so thankful for resources that come our way that help us with that. One resource you will have, some of our people in our congregation will have received is just today, Kristen Mulkey, our children's director, sent an email to all of our families within our children's ministry to say, hey, here's some resources for you and your family to be intentional about Easter week, whether it's crafts that you can do with your hands, songs to listen to, stories to read, and so helpful. And so I'm going to go ahead and link that in this email because maybe you're a grandparent, maybe you're an auntie or an uncle, or maybe you're just kind of a mom to neighborhood kids or friend kids or a dad, and you want to be intentional. Well, go ahead and use that email that Kristen sent. But I've also invited Jenny Fridge. Jenny is not only a dear sister in Christ, but the wife of one of our elders, Eric Fridge. And Jenny and Eric are now kind of entering the empty nest phase. They've raised children who are now adults. And I asked Jenny, would you reflect back on your time as a mom of young kids, and what were some of the things that you did to help your kids intentionally slow down at Easter and reflect on what it was and what Easter is? And so I want to share with you what Jenny had to share. So here we go. Jenny Fridge sharing some incredibly practical, helpful tips for us as we head into Easter.
Like many of you, I grew up celebrating all the seasonal holidays, and my mind is filled with sweet memories and traditions that were special and unique for my family growing up. So when we were a young family, we wanted to create traditions that would be a part of our own family story. And I can confidently tell you today that our grown children still talk about and anticipate many of those traditions. Specifically for Easter, we wanted to be sure that we incorporated more than just bunnies, jelly beans, and Easter eggs into the season leading up to Resurrection Sunday. But how do you do that with young kids? How do you begin to tell the story, the climax of the story that begins in Genesis, how Jesus died, he was buried, and how he ultimately resurrected? These are weighty and holy moments. And whether you're a parent or a grandparent, these are amazing opportunities. And I'm sure there are many resources available these days, but Daniel asked me to share just a few simple ideas to get you thinking. So first, to connect the entire story of Jesus from his birth to his death and resurrection, a couple of years ago, I decided to leave our nativity scene out after Christmas throughout the entire year. This visual reminder of our Savior is now constantly before us in our dining room, and it's one less thing to put up after Christmas. And one of our favorite resources you may have heard of, it's called Resurrection Eggs. And I have them right here. It's a fun way to tell the story of Easter, whether you have an Easter egg hunt in your living room or your backyard. But you can open each egg, and each egg tells the story. You see each symbol as it relates to Jesus' journey on the cross. And the last one is an empty egg. These actually you can make. I found online DIY resurrection eggs. So you can find those online and maybe make those together as a family. We also loved books. There's lots of storybooks. There's lots of Easter books. And of course, the Bible story is a great place to begin. No holiday would be complete without traditions surrounding food. And so resurrection rolls, if you're not familiar, look them up. It's a great cooking activity for kids of any age at Easter time. Recipes abound. But we keep it simple in the Fridge family with either crescent rolls or biscuits wrapped around a marshmallow and dipped, of course, in butter and cinnamon sugar. And they're fun because when they're done baking, they're empty inside, just like Jesus' tomb. So that is fun for the youngest to the oldest. Speaking of Jesus' tomb, one year we made a clay model of the tomb, complete with a stone rolled away and 3 crosses. That same tomb has been part of our Easter decor every year since. And finally, it's helpful for kids and adults to understand the progression of the events of Holy Week, beginning with Palm Sunday. And that's particularly helpful as we anticipate the Good Friday service coming up at Cornerstone on Friday. And I actually had, when my kids were growing up, we had a large poster that went through each day with a map that showed where Jesus was exactly and what he and his disciples were doing. And while the Gospels may not show exactly when some of the things happen, you can still lay out the events in an orderly way. So make a poster or other activity, a craft activity to show the events in a memorable way as you remember the wonder of Jesus this Easter season. I hope this is helpful to you.
Well, I'm so grateful for Jenny sharing some of those practical things that she has done with her kids over the years. And if you received the email that this video is a part of, there's links to all those resources that Jenny recommended. And I just encourage you, maybe it's a little overwhelming. Perhaps your family is new to your faith, or you just come back to your faith and you're trying to figure out how to do this. I want to encourage you to pick one thing this year and try one thing. Maybe it's the thing that your family ends up loving and it becomes the tradition year after year. Maybe it doesn't quite work for your family and next year you try something different. Or maybe you do it and then you realize, okay, well, that was good, but we want to add a different layer to it. And so next year you do 2 things that kind of help you unpack and sit with the powerful message of Easter week for you and your family. Whatever it is, church, I want to encourage us to be intentional. You know, in Leviticus 23, God called his people to celebrate the Sabbath, that weekly reminder not only of God's provision the week before, but that he would be a faithful God in the week after, a chance to stop and worship him, to rest from our labor as we trust him to provide. And then the feasts throughout the year were celebrations of not only what God had done in the past, but were celebrations of God's provision in the harvest and a declaration of trust moving forward. That's what we're called to do. And Easter weekend, in many ways, is that. We look back at the cross, so grateful for what Christ has done for us. And we look forward to not only the future hope of heaven and eternity with him, but we step into the day after Easter realizing that the risen Lord is with us. And then if we placed our faith in him, we walk with him in newness of life each and every day. And so we have the joy of his strength and his presence with us. And what an incredible thing that is. So this Easter week, may we celebrate what God has done. May we trust in and declare that he will be a faithful God moving forward as he has always been. And may all of that lead us to worship. And perhaps some of that this week is doing it through intentionally remembering together with our families. Church, I love you. I look forward to seeing you Friday night at 6:30. For those of you who are going to join us for the Good Friday service, and then Sunday morning for an exciting morning of celebrating the resurrection at 9 a.m. and 10:45 with an Easter egg hunt to follow the 10:45 service. Love you all. Have a wonderful week and happy Easter week. May it be a week of remembering and reflecting and worshiping. Take care.